Hunting is an age-old activity practiced for centuries, an activity many find essential. But when does this ancient practice cross the line? And when does hunting serve its purpose? I'm Rana Kamal. This is Our Issues, Twin Cities. In the spacious fields of Sandstone, Minnesota, lies a safe haven for wild cats. At the Wild Cat Sanctuary, over 100 big cats are free to roam in large lands similar to their habitat.
No wild cat should need a sanctuary. They should be left in the wild and not kept as pets, not kept as trophies.
Tammy founded the Wild Cat Sanctuary in 1999 as a non-profit, no-kill rescue facility for wild cats.
Our main mission is to end the captive wildlife crisis. Most people don't realize how many big cats are kept as pets in the United States, and it's detrimental to the cat and also for public safety. And so our job is to provide a forever home and inspire change to end the captive wildlife crisis.
How common is private ownership of wild cats here in the U.S.?
It's huge here in the U.S. We receive upwards of 30 calls a month from people wanting to surrender their big cats that they've purchased as pets. In Minnesota alone, we are lucky that in 2005 we passed a law that outlawed private ownership of exotic animals, and we removed 33 lions and tigers from private homes just the summer the law passed.
How dangerous is private ownership to the population of wildcats?
Hugely. I mean, when we are overbreeding tigers in captivity here in the United States, we're contributing to an international problem. Overbreeding of cats here, a tiger is free to a good home. You can't even sell a tiger for $500 anymore. They're not worth anything in the US, but they are worth a lot on the black market. So if you were to kill and taxidermy and part out a tiger, you can get upwards of $10,000. So we're fueling the international part trade for exotic animals, and that's why having legislation and education here in the US is really important.
The issues surrounding wildcats quickly surfaced after the tragedy of one African lion that sparked international outrage.
He was very clear in his statements that if he had known that this lion meant something to that community, that he would not have killed this lion. But he's not repentant for killing. He's not even repentant for killing Cecil.
Dallas was the executive director of the Animal Rights Coalition for 8 years. Today, she remains a strong animal activist. Trophy hunting is not a new trend. It's been around for decades. Why did the killing of Cecil the lion stir up so much controversy?
It's because Cecil had a name. And most of the animals that are used in our society, they're unseen, they're unknown, they have no real identity that distinguishes them from any other animals of their kind. So with Cecil, he wasn't just a lion. He was this lion. He was a particular lion. He was recognizable on sight. People knew his habits, they knew his preferences, they understood who his family members were and their relationships to one another. And so that really made Cecil an individual and is someone with a personality, and that makes him more relatable.
The general public doesn't realize every day that trophy hunting is happening internationally, but also here in canned hunting in the US. And Cecil the lion, it was a horrible tragedy, but because he was a special lion and known to conservationists and the locals and was bringing in a lot of ecotourism dollars, people really gravitated to that issue and said, this is crazy. How can we kill such a lion that resembles so much?
Spanning for decades, trophy hunting was a popular pastime, especially here in the United States.
Trophy hunting is not a dignified sport. There's no reason for it. The conservation value, because of the money the hunter gives, is so minuscule of what goes back into that community, into the animals, that I think the outrage was there that this has to stop.
What would compel somebody to do this? What would compel somebody to spend $55,000 and fly halfway across the world to go and kill a lion? I mean, I can't fathom that. I think most people can't fathom that. What I do think is that there is something my personal belief is that there's something deeply wrong with the, some level of identity or confidence, or, like there's some deep-seated insecurity or something that compels these people to go out and destroy and conquer beings that are perceived as powerful and dangerous, and that, that somehow if they're able to kill these creatures, then that power sort of transfers onto them.
It's ego-driven. Why do we need a dead animal on our wall? I've seen it over and over. I get told because it's a beautiful animal. It's a beautiful animal when it's alive and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. I don't know how a dead skinned animal on the wall resembles any of its beauty it did and what it was doing in the wild.
Was the killing of Cecil the lion a crime?
I believe it's a crime. I believe it's a moral crime, absolutely.
It's an ethical crime, yes, but that's where the red tape comes in, is the government of Zimbabwe, also what the tracker was doing, and then now that this is an American citizen that did this, what ramifications are there for America? And right now, as we've seen in the news, the hunter is not being prosecuted, and to me that's disturbing.
Coming up on Our Issues Twin Cities, one of the most popular hunting activities in Minnesota, plus a local organization fighting for the protection of our very own endangered species. The gray wolf, sometimes called the timber wolf, has faced human persecution, habitat deterioration, and the reduction of prey populations, leading to their decline over the years.
There have been 7 cases brought forward where the Fish and Wildlife Service has tried to delist wolves, inappropriately so.
Maureen is the founder of Howling for Wolves. Humans have always had strong emotional feelings towards wolves, whether it be fascination, fear, or hatred. Why is that?
Wolves have played a role in human civilization since agricultural societies started, and that many of the fairy tales and myths about the big bad wolf were really a way to demonize an animal that competes with man for things like habitat. And so if a farmer has gone into a wooded, forested area, cleared it and tilled the land, wolves will be displaced, and usually they would actually just die out on their own, but part of the agricultural society, especially in the United States when we formed as a country, we cleared the country of predators almost completely on the East Coast and then moved west. And we paralleled that with what we did with our indigenous people. We put strychnine in wolves, we gave them mange, we did, and we basically wiped them out.
To ensure the long-term survival of Minnesota wolves, Howling for Wolves was founded in 2012 as a way to educate the public and policymakers about the benefits of a viable wolf population within the forest ecosystem. How have the strong human feelings, either fear or fascination, affected the wolf population?
Luckily, the fascination and the trying to develop a better understanding is what kind of brought wolves back. Okay. And what we've learned is that there's great ecological function that wolves play in the ecosystems where they exist. Basically, they help vegetation grow. They keep the trees getting above browsing height, so that the deer can't just continue to browse everywhere. They keep them kind of moving, and especially around streams and rivers, so that you have better water when you have wolves. And then we saw that's what happened in Yellowstone, but we've also seen it happen in Wisconsin. There are places where you can see that the forest understory plants are better with wolves that have recolonized in Wisconsin in some places.
Currently, wolves are endangered species. The State Department of Natural Resources estimates that there are about 2,400 wolves in Minnesota today. How important is it to protect the wolf population?
I think it's very important. We have very little knowledge of even the genetic diversity of our wolves, and yet we have people, they've been killed at extreme amounts. Within the first year of them losing federal protections, the population trend went down by 25%. 1/4 of the population was wiped out within 1 year. And just last year, 1/4 of the packs dropped. Between 2014 and 2015, over nearly 100 packs were lost. So without protection, we can't really work on what we need to do to recover the wolf fully.
The wolf population now is approximately twice the recovery goal. So our feeling is that the wolf has recovered, and that was the Fish and Wildlife Service did delist the wolf.
Craig is the executive director of the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association. Because the wolf population is always continuously bouncing back from being on the endangered species list, do you think that hunting them would affect their populations even more?
They have not bounced back and forth on the list because of their population. Their population, once it recovered, has stayed quite stable and has increased. What's happened is there have been judicial challenges, and it's been on those court rulings that have put them back on the list, and then the Fish and Wildlife Service has gone through their processes and determined that there is a stable population and delisted them, and then they get sued again, and then it's been back on the list.
How are wolves beneficial to deer hunters?
We support good habitat for all species. We want a thriving wolf population, but just like the wolf population, it can be managed. The deer population can be too high, too low. It should be managed, and the wolf population is the same. They need to reach a sustainable level, and the wolf has far exceeded that. And as it grows higher, you have more of those social conflicts, depredation of cattle, high take on deer in these tough winters. So it's finding that balance, and we think DNR can manage the wolf herd, and there can be a reasonable hunt.
The Minnesota Deer Hunters Association was founded over 30 years ago. Today, they represent over 20,000 deer hunters. And as the current deer hunter season is underway, this will be the second straight season with strict limits intended to let deer numbers increase. How has that affected the deer hunting season in the past, and how do you project it affecting this upcoming season?
Well, we support the conservative season. Of course, we like to get deer. We like deer to eat, but we like to hunt. We like the whole experience. But with the herd as low as it's been, for example, the harvest last year was about 139,000. In the highest year in 2003, it was 290,000. So it's about half of what it was, a little less than half. And so we need to bring that herd back. And so, to be clear, hunters like to hunt, but we want the deer herd to be robust and healthy. And so a scaled back hunt is good. I can spend many days in the stand and not shoot a deer and be very happy, enjoying all that has to do with the great outdoors and just in absorbing it all, the experience of it. So another conservative season this year is good, and we'll see. The mild winter last year has led to a lot more deer, a lot more does with twins, and the herd is resilient and will bounce back.
Some people believe that animals belong to their natural habitat and should not be hunted. Why do you think hunting is essential?
Well, I think there are two components. There's a cultural component, as I just briefly talked about, that it's in our heritage. My ancestors, when they came over, they hunted for subsistence. But now, too, there's a biological component to it. We, with our habitation, have changed things, and there's a balance in populations and things. When we have high numbers of deer, you have social issues that go with car deer accidents, depredation of crops, etc. So it's finding a biological balance and then having the social component as well, that the herd is managed by the DNR to have a sustainable level but not create human-animal conflict.
And although many like Craig support the Wolves Endangerment Species Act, Maureen continues to advocate on behalf of the protection of all wolves. What would a wolfless world mean?
If you go to places that have no top predator in their ecosystem, you will see a barren kind of forest. We'll have less birds, less insects for the birds, basically less of a lot of different animals, and the coyotes tend to take the top spot then, and that creates problems for the foxes, which then we think may even create problems of more Lyme's disease. So there are effects that we think are happening, don't have absolute proof, because frankly we don't have very many populations of wild wolves that have been left undisturbed.
Up next on Our Issues Twin Cities, the effects big game hunting has had on our wildlife. Today, there are 41,000 endangered species, with an estimated 16,000 threatened with extinction. More than 500 lions are killed every year in Africa as trophies, resulting in the severe decline of the so-called king of the jungle. How has that affected the lion population?
I believe that a lot of them are actually bred for this purpose, and so they're bred in facilities specifically to be auctioned off to people for a price, and oftentimes those are called canned hunts, where they pay the money and they're guaranteed a kill, which is for the most part what happens with these exotic animal hunting expeditions. So I think that when you kill and take out, especially, you know, the more desirable individuals who are the more impressive looking ones, the males with the big manes, and the ones who kind of have this aura of masculinity and danger around them. Like I said before, I think that destabilizes the community of those animals and causes a lot of different problems. I think it causes problems with population, but also ecosystems.
A lot of the wild trophy huntings that are out there aren't necessarily wild African lions. What's happening, it has fueled a trade, which is captive bred lion farms in Africa. And these animals are bred for the sure purpose of being shot by a trophy hunter. If you look at a lot of these trophies that are on the wall, they're not showing any scars on the face of these lions. They're impeccable. A wild lion that's been in the wild for several years is going to have scars. It's going to show what it does in the wild, which is hunting and protecting. And these trophy hunters don't want that. So what it is it's fueling a trade of where we're just breeding lion cubs that are actually pretty tame and domesticated, putting them into free land just for a hunt and a kill. And that's very inhumane.
The big game hunting industry is believed to contribute over $200 million a year to African governments, where in some countries trophy hunting appears to be the primary driver of lion population declines outside protected areas. Trophy hunting is not against the law, but do you think it should be illegal?
I think as a society we really need to rethink killing animals for fun. I just think that we do. You know, we haven't gone, I think most people would say, okay, if you're going to consume and eat the animal, we see that there's a value to that, especially for ungulates like deer and elk. Sure. But pretty soon, with the trend of our wildlife going down, I think that we need to completely rethink killing for fun.
Of course, we support hunting and a reasonable hunting. I think what was so emotional about the facts as they were laid out in the Cecil situation were not good. They're not something we'd be interested in. We believe in fair chase, which means that you hunt with an ethic. And the way they presented that, and again I say it was presented, I don't know the facts of that, but the idea that the animal was lured out of a preserve and then killed and all the other facts with it were not what we're about.
There is definitely many other ways to conserve wildlife, and I don't believe that they're saying that trophy hunting conserves wildlife. That is a web of untruths.
So how important is it to protect our wildlife?
Vital. Although I would say that just protecting wildlife, I think that I don't really consider them to be ours. And I think that common way that we tend to think of them is, our wildlife, our environment, you know, our resources, that places this, we automatically presume that these creatures, or, you know, these lands or rivers or ecosystems, that they are somehow inherently, we have a right to do with them as we please. And my belief, and the Animal Rights Coalition's belief, is that they exist and they deserve, they have inherent worth on their own. That they don't need to be, they don't need to have economic value, they don't need to have any kind, they don't need to be of benefit to human beings. They just deserve to have space and be on this planet and live their lives just as we would like to.
Within our future generations, you know, a tiger might be gone in the wild within 25 years. Lions are closely there behind. We need to protect wildlife in the wild, provide them funding for protection for land space, as well as rangers on the ground to prevent poaching and hunting of our wildlife.
And throughout the extent of the international public outrage over the killing of Cecil the lion rose awareness and even drew attention to important issues facing the wildlife crisis. What do you hope people get out of the whole controversy of Cecil the lion?
So many of us also are complicit and participate in harming animals for when we don't need to. And that's what I would love for people to reconsider in their own lives, how this looks. If they're angry about Walter Palmer killing Cecil for fun, then, you know, are there things that they can do in their own lives right now that would alleviate animal pain and suffering and violence?
If we don't speak up, there's going to be more Cecil the lion's future at stake. And so each one of us has the power to make change.
Thank you for joining me this week on Our Issues Twin Cities. I'm Rana Kamal. See you next time.